Yeah bro, just watch this deleted scene, you totally won't have nightmares after it. DVD extras, in-universe commercials, subtext, theories about cannibalism, wait what? And a series of prequel comics that have some weird stuff going on. The hidden lore of Wall-E was shockingly overwhelming at first. Hey, I managed to work in the title this time, that's fun. And apologies for how this video opened. I wanted you to feel just how overwhelming all of this was at first too. So let's take a step back and begin properly. After the NSA tapes from The Incredibles uncovered a treasure trove of in-universe history that most people hadn't known about for over 20 years, I set a task for myself to find another Pixar film with an equivalent or at least substantial amount of hidden lore. And after going through a good few Pixar movies and their DVD extras, I landed on what should have been the most obvious example from the get-go. Wall-E is a very special film. Naturally, there's a reason it's considered one of Pixar's best, but I mean from a storytelling and lore perspective, there's a lot more to chew on just from how atmospheric the opening is. The first 35 minutes of Wall-E is still one of the most captivating openings to a film I've ever seen, and it gives you a lot to think about with its masterful visual storytelling and barely any dialogue. The ruined city streets, skyscrapers of trash, abandoned buildings, 700-year-old remnants of the human race and the megacorporate led to the Earth's current state, along with the numerous deactivated and broken Wall-E units littered about, conveys such an overwhelming sense of loneliness. It's not like Wall-E stops being a great film after its first half. The second half is great too, but in a much different way. A more expected way for a movie targeted towards a general audience. And while it still has its moments that tingle my lore-obsessed brain, that first half does such a great job at achieving everything it sets out to do, and more importantly for this video, got me to realize all over again just how much is going on beneath the surface of another renowned Pixar classic. And while I think the NSA tapes are such an incredible bombshell that they're hard to top, doing just a little bit of research reveals there's still quite a lot of interesting stuff going on with Wall-E that led to this video being a bit more involved on my part. Instead of having 50% of the video revolve around playing clips, there's more to chew on all around. Some of it delving into terrifying fan theory territory with some shocking plausibility, and some of it going over a long-forgotten series of comics set before the events of the film, with their canonicity kind of up in the air. Though considering Wall-E is pretty much one of the only popular Pixar IPs to be respectfully left alone to stand on its own 2 feet without franchise exploitation, I don't think there's any need to worry about a new Wall-E project getting announced that definitively divorces these comics from canon. I hope so, at least. I find them quite interesting, and I'd hate for this video to age poorly. There's a good bit to cover here, so I will try and keep this video as brief as I can without skimming on details. If you do feel overwhelmed at any point, feel free to check out and come back at any time. YouTube's chapter feature is quite handy at making this easier to do. And as one final note before we dive into all of this, these videos only focus on hidden lore. This generally means anything that's not explained in the film itself, and more often than not, ends up being a rather obscure piece of info that not many are aware of through small details or supplementary material. This is also why you will not be getting a plot recap of the events of the film here, even though it is canon. I hope that's all well and good. Let's begin. By and Large, or BNL, is the big evil megacorp that turned this universe's version of Earth into a living hell, and had every person on the planet evacuated. You could make the argument they weren't really doing anything particularly evil in the black and white sense. I mean, on the surface, their motivation is to make every aspect of life easier and more comfortable, but trying to argue that a corporation owning literally everything ever, including world governments and the police, isn't somewhat evil is a tough uphill battle, and also tells me just how much you like Disney. Jokes aside, it's easy to infer what BNL's whole deal is in the movie itself, but a large part of their history, as well as the extent of how much stuff they owned and controlled in everyday life, can be found in these short but still very interesting in-universe promotional videos for the company, as well as classified pitch videos showing the company leadership and investors with regards to Operation Recolonize. You can find these videos all over YouTube, but interestingly, they weren't included in the DVD bonus features. Apparently, when Wall-E was first being marketed, Disney and Pixar launched an in-universe website for By and Large that included these videos. Hard to verify it for myself since the site has been lost media for a long time, but all of these videos are official, no doubt. Hi, Cartoon Chief from the future here. As I was editing this video, I did a double check on some of the archive links for the BNL website, and it turns out my Wi-Fi has just been griefing me this entire time because they actually do work, and a surprising amount of the original website is archived. I took a look through here, and there is a lot of interesting stuff packed into it, though obviously some of it doesn't function properly, and it really does a good job at showing the extent of BNL's control of the planet. Their worldwide office is located in Buckingham Palace, for crying out loud. I tried accessing some other links that were available, like links to a BNL store page, but it's only led me down another rabbit hole to some surprisingly nostalgic parts of the internet I thought I'd never see again. I'd recommend taking a look at this website when you have the time, because while I currently can't restructure my whole video to talk about what's in here, it's worth a look for the novelty alone. Let me know in the comments if you'd like an extra video going over this whole website. I'm not sure how crazy the copyright protection is on these, so I'll try and play these sparingly, so you can get a decent picture about the company's history. If there ends up not being many clips in the final cut, that's because Content ID spanked me on the ass and I'm not happy about it.
The By and Large family of companies offers an ever-expanding range of consumer solutions, but it wasn't always the unparalleled provider of convenience it is today.
As you probably just heard, By and Large had a much more humble beginning compared to their larger-than-life status 700 years into the future by starting out as a frozen yogurt company. They would eventually acquire a men's suit company by the name of Large Industries, which led to the now iconic name of the brand, By and Large. From here, however, things aren't nearly as specific about what other companies they acquired or how they were acquired, but what we do know is that By and Large's momentum from their first acquisition kinda never stopped.
By and Large has become the world leader in every conceivable field, including world leadership.
Bazillion BNL, the Big B, BNL Best Brands, Buy and Lug, and hundreds more.
The company went on a worldwide steamroll, accumulating more wealth and more companies and constantly seeking to be a provider in every area of life that had some kind of consumer. The obvious options of food, technology, and essentials are obviously here, but By and Large really began to live up to the large part in its name, as the company became involved with pretty much every facet of day-to-day life. Here is a short list of the many things By and Large became a worldwide leader in: consumer goods, electronics, energy, aerospace, construction, science and health, space, storage, supercenters, engineering, hydropower, infrastructures, inventions, media, finance, food services, medical science, mortgage loans, pet care, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, psychotherapies, ports and harbors, real estate, fusion research, government, repairs, retail, robotics, supergrids, travel services, utilities, and probably a whole bunch more, but you get the point. I would have loved to have known just how By and Large was able to achieve the all-encompassing company dream of owning literally everything in the world in such a small amount of time. Going from humble yogurt company to worldwide conglomerate of which nobody has ever seen before in a matter of only a few decades is not just impressive, it's terrifying. Many have harped on WALL-E over the years for not exactly being subtle with its themes and critiques of consumerism and its showcasing of the inherent dangers of late-stage capitalism. I'm sure the irony was not lost on the writers, but I think there's plenty of value in showing the blatant extremes this sort of stuff can go to if companies aren't kept in check. And these commercials add an extra layer of plausibility to B&L's rise to power, even if it does skim on the details. All it takes is a couple of company acquisitions to be a large player in the game of life. And while the short time frame of B&L's growth might just be a tad too unrealistic, the scenario in general definitely isn't. Sorry to go on a bit of a rant about this stuff, but I do find WALL-E to be incredibly well written, even if it is a bit preachy with its message. Adding on to all of this, Earth under By and Large would eventually be considered a light dictatorship. Not that By and Large was rounding up opposition and murdering them, no. They were buying the opposition. By and Large owned and ran everything on the planet by the year 2057, with countries around the globe submitting to them and giving them near total political and financial control of Earth. I would have really liked to have seen the backlash to the US flag having its iconic stars replaced with B&L logos. Imagine the Cracker Barrel controversy, but with people actually willing to blow their shit smooth off over it. Though the editing of the promotional videos is a little crude, though definitely intentional to try and sell that these were videos shown in board meetings and the like, we know that B&L had total control over education, healthcare, and even the police. It kinda does make you wonder what the lives of the people who were vehemently against B&L's takeover of Earth were like, as the global population became more and more complacent with how easy and stress-free they were making life in general. I can imagine there were a good number of Johnny Silverhand types around this time, but ultimately any efforts or opposition to B&L either quickly stopped or got bought out by B&L themselves. By the year 2105, Earth was in a state of mass consumerism. Every need was fulfilled and satisfied by and Large, as they became an inescapable fact of life. Some people had lived full lives and died seeing the B&L logo every single day. And as was shown in WALL-E, this mass consumerism through every subsidiary of By and Large led to most of the Earth being positively covered in unrecycled trash, and the rising toxicity levels made life on Earth near unsustainable. Around this time, global CEO of By and Large, Shelby Forthright, conducted a plan now known as Operation Cleanup, as well as its follow-up plan of Operation Recolonize.
But folks, we have a plan to make things better. Way better. BNL better.
This two-step plan involved creating a line of executive starliners to take the citizens of Earth on an intergalactic cruise for roughly 5 years, while millions of WALL-E units spent that time cleaning up all the trash left on the planet in an effort to reduce toxicity levels and make life sustainable for when the 5-year cruise was over and everyone could return to Earth.
Providing unparalleled environmental benefits for Earth and a sizable profit margin for every BNL shareholder, because we're all in this together.
Well, if that isn't foreboding, I mean, fucking hell. However, you all know this plan didn't exactly work out, as in the year 2110, Shelby Forthright would send out a classified video to every autopilot on each starship, declaring that the Earth had become far too polluted and toxic for humanity to keep living there, initiating Directive A113 without the knowledge of any of the human captains, which would see the autopilots take complete control of each starship and never return to Earth. After that, nearly 700 years pass and we get to the events of Wall-E. As said before, I won't be recapping the story of the film in this video, but it is worth noting that by this point in time, by and large no longer exists outside of its branding. With no planet and no businesses, it's pretty obvious the company would soon go under. But its legacy as the leading champion in comfort and making humanity complacent in their mass consumerism has not faded in the slightest, as they've essentially become larger than life itself. Kind of a godly figure if you think about it a certain way. I mean, the kids on the Axiom are pretty much indoctrinated.
B is for by and large, your very best friend.
So yeah, that's kind of the history of BNL in its entirety, and how they screwed up the planet so badly. Not gonna lie, I would have loved if we had more specifics about their rise given just how fast it seemingly was, but these ads paint a pretty effective picture of just how much power and control they had. When I was a kid, I just kinda assumed BNL was like a gigantic, massive supermarket chain of some kind that also had its own unspecified amount of power in the world. I mean, to be fair, most of the BNL products the film focuses on are food related, and one of the bigger landmarks we see at the start of the movie is the BNL equivalent to Costco, but these extras really hammer in that, oh shit, these guys kinda own fucking everything, didn't they? Imagine getting drugs planted on you by a BNL cop. Now, with all of the BNL stuff out of the way, you're probably wondering, where's Wall-E? Okay, well done, smartass. I mean, Wall-E was left to clean up the Earth for nearly 700 years, mind you. There's gotta be some interesting stuff that happened during that time. Well, the whole point of the opening of Wall-E was to demonstrate just how lonely and monotonous his existence is, forever cleaning up trash on his own for people who will never come back. It's not like there's a whole lot that can happen during this time that's of particular interest. Or at least it seems that way, because a couple of people partnered with Disney did manage to tell some stories about Wall-E from around this time period, and wouldn't you know it, it came in the form of an entire series of prequel comics that no one ever talks about. Enter Boom Studios, a fairly niche comic and graphic novel publisher that I see the name of get tossed around in conversation sometimes, but tend to struggle to name a comic series they've worked on that's hugely popular or well known. I mostly know them from their collaborations with Cartoon Network. I remember reading a couple of their Adventure Time comics actually, but other than that, they're not exactly on everyone's radar. That being said, back in 2008 they managed to strike a deal with Disney to create a line of comics based on some of Disney and Pixar's most popular IPs, like Toy Story, DuckTales, and The Incredibles. In fact, if you watch my video on the hidden lore of The Incredibles, you may remember me bringing up the Boom Studios comics for a few seconds as a neat piece of trivia. I've been meaning to actually fully read these at some point for a future video, but if you're at all interested in any of Boom's Pixar comics, you'll likely find they aren't exactly easy to get a hold of. This deal with Disney didn't last very long, and they eventually stopped reprinting these comics around the early 2010s, which has made getting a hold of actual physical copies near impossible with how expensive they are nowadays on sites like eBay and Amazon, and getting good quality scans of the comics to read digitally is only really possible via piracy, and given how obscure these comics are, despite being directly attached to Disney and Pixar, a lot of comic piracy websites don't really have them. They are bordering on lost media at this point. Despite the fact that Disney could have begun reprinting these comics at any time, for the 5 years they owned Boom Studios after their acquisition of Fox was completed in 2019. Okay, that was a lot of history. I will get into the comics in a second, but I do need to flag something up. As subscribers of mine may know from a couple of videos ago, I am still recovering from surgery and had to cut some corners with this video, so I didn't literally die of exhaustion because my body is already weak as piss without having 3 holes in my gut. It's for this reason that I will be borrowing my footage of the Wall-E prequel comics from this excellent video by YouTuber McDowell, going over the full series, as I was struggling trying to find decent scans of the comics myself, and even if I did manage to find some, the 7th issue is apparently completely missing from a lot of these sites, and it's only thanks to McDowell's video that I can actually technically read this comic due to him managing to secure a physical copy before it dramatically shot up in price. I'd highly recommend checking McDowell's video out after you finish this one, as even though I'm going to be spoiling the story rotten, the presentation and sound design of his video is downright excellent, and it's a great way to experience the comics for yourself, without having to either sail the high seas for a stupid amount of time, or having to pay a stupid amount of money for a physical copy. Here, take a listen.
The next day, Wall-E continues stacking up new towers one trash cube at a time, as we follow him throughout the area.
Should also go without saying, but I'll be providing my own distinct commentary and impressions and won't just be recapping every event that happens here. If you want that experience, I suggest you check out McDowell's video. With all of that said though, let's finally get into these comics. As was previously stated, Boom Studios' Wall-E comics are set years before the events of the movie. However, what's interesting is that half of these comics are set far further in the future, and the other half is set far further in the past, while also having its own story arc. Both halves have their own distinct strengths and weaknesses that I find really fascinating, taking vastly different directions in terms of tone, atmosphere, and storytelling, which isn't a surprise given each half is a different main writer. The first half of the comics are primarily written by Jay Torres, and the second half is primarily written by Bryce Carlson. I'll talk more about this once we get to the second half of the series, but keep this in mind for now. Issues 0 to 3, yes it does start with issue 0, that's not a mistake, are probably my favorite of the bunch due to how they effortlessly replicate the impeccable atmosphere and overwhelming loneliness that made the opening of the movie so effective. There's barely any dialogue, it's an episodic series of events showing Wall-E having brief, rather inconsequential adventures in his day-to-day life, while introducing a couple of things found in the movie like showing how Wall-E found his igloo cooler and how he met his pet cockroach. The most tension you'll find in these issues is probably in issue 1, where Wall-E notices that the incinerators have stopped working, effectively meaning that none of the trash that's being cubed and stacked into tall towers all around the planet can be properly disposed of. But despite Wall-E's best in-vain efforts to try and get the incinerators running again, he doesn't seem terribly distraught over it, despite it effectively making his entire existence pointless. There isn't much that happens throughout these issues that's that exciting, but it captures the magic of Wall-E's first 35 minutes almost to a T. I wouldn't say the artwork is the prettiest I've ever seen, but it's still pretty well drawn, and what it lacks in detail it makes up for with its coloring and large wide panels juxtaposing Wall-E with the desolate landscape around him, emphasizing just how large, depressing, disgusting, and empty the earth is, and how truly alone Wall-E is. It's not all doom and gloom, there's a couple of cute moments, courtesy of Wall-E being a precious little guy who's done nothing wrong in his life, except towards janitors. And most of issue 3 revolves around Wall-E playfully trying to catch a cockroach, but overall I'd say these 4 issues do a tremendous job at capturing the essence of the movie's first half. By far my favorite issue out of all of them though happens to be the first one, issue 0. It starts pretty lighthearted, showing a time where Wall-E still had other Wall-E units to be around, and it's pretty cute, up until Wall-E finds one of them completely powered down and unresponsive. As Wall-E continues through the day, we see more and more deactivated Wall-E units, until it's just the Wall-E that we know and another Wall-E unit nicknamed Y, with all of the cubicles for Wall-E's to rest in being completely empty. After Y ignores Wall-E and goes to power down for the night, Wall-E wakes up the next morning to find him completely unresponsive. This was the moment that Wall-E became truly alone, witnessing all of his friends power down one by one while he alone remains. It's easy to question why all of the other Wall-E units are powering down forever when Wall-E himself is perfectly fine, but one comment on McDowell's video raised a very interesting but depressing point. The Wall-E units are powering down because they're choosing to power down. They've realized that the humans are never coming back, and instead of choosing to recharge themselves and continue living out their monotonous lives, they'd rather just power down and stop functioning altogether. Even if our Wall-E found a way to recharge them, they just waited out and powered down again. Wall-E is the only remaining unit whose spirit hasn't broken, and he is destined to live out the remainder of his days completely alone. It's a shockingly effective tale and a great way to angle a prequel story like this, by relying on the strengths of what's almost universally considered the best part of the movie, and showing the moment that finally led to Wall-E being left on his own. I'm not gonna lie, it made me kinda emotional. It's a short story I consider to be on par with the storytelling quality of the movie itself. The rest of issues 1, 2, and 3 don't really come close to this, but still manage to tell some touching stories that emphasize Wall-E's loneliness, with issue 3 being the closest installment on the overall timeline to the events of the movie. While these 4 issues are far from exciting, I honestly think they're pretty good and worth reading for yourself. They're good additions to the story and overall canon. Then we have issues 4, 5, 6, and...
Say the line, Bart!
Issues 6 and 7. These issues are a massive case of tonal, storytelling, and timeline whiplash, as we're suddenly taken from the furthest point in the timeline before the events of the movie to about nearly 700 years in the past. Set in the year 2110, 5 years after all of humanity was sent on a starship cruise throughout the cosmos as Operation Cleanup commenced back on Earth. As previously mentioned, issues 4, 5, 6, and you gotta pay me to say it again, are written by Bryce Carlson, taking over from Jay Torres. I believe both of these two understand the appeal of Wall-E and its story, but in very different ways. Jay Torres Horace is great with the more atmospheric visual storytelling that made the opening so good, whereas Bryce Carlson specializes in the more light-hearted side, and relying more on dialogue. I think if these two work together to co-write a new WALL-E prequel story, we could have potential gold in our hands, but for now we've just got two very different takes on WALL-E that have their own unique strengths. The second half of the comics are no longer episodic, and instead it's a full story arc focusing on the brand new antagonist towards our WALL-E and the other WALL-E units, as well as an astronaut named Andy returning to Earth after spending 7 years in space, and finding the Earth trashed and completely abandoned, having gone on a mission to space roughly 2 years before Operation Cleanup was in full swing, and missed his chance to board the Axiom or any of the other starliners. Even more tragic is that his family is currently aboard the Axiom, and his rocket is damaged, leaving him permanently stranded on Earth until he's able to fix it. While I sorely missed the tone and atmosphere from the first 4 issues, I found WALL-E and Andy's friendship to be incredibly sweet. Andy isn't a complex character or anything, but he's nice and easy to root for. It was nice seeing WALL-E encounter a human for the first time, or at least the first time in forever, and helping him repair his rocket and hopefully return to his family. The scene of Andy and WALL-E driving while Andy plays a song on the radio is especially sweet. Hell, I like the scenes of them driving together in general, even if they don't last very long. I thought it was a great way to show the two of them bonding after only meeting each other recently. That's all well and good, but there's one major issue with these issues that I found a bit hard to ignore, and that would be the antagonist for this story arc, Bully. Get it? His name is Bully because he's mainly present in issue 4 and then intermittently throughout the remaining issues. Bully basically goes around being a massive killjoy and pushing the other WALL-E units around and confiscating the things they find and try to show to their friends, and then goes around powering them down and trapping them in cages like he's on some sort of power trip. It's implied Bully is kind of like the WALL-E bot's supervisor of sorts, there to make sure they're all being efficient and not slacking off on the job, though that does raise a few questions about why BNL made the WALL-E bots so incredibly crap in comparison to every other robot they made around the same time. To be completely frank, Bully is fucking silly, not just from a storytelling perspective. Having a gigantic big WALL-E unit abusing his power as a supervisor and bullying all the little WALL-E units as some sort of dictator feels way too cartoony and clashes too heavily with WALL-E as a concept and a universe, but simply from a design perspective, I think Bully just blows. We already know what a big WALL-E unit looks like. They're called WALL-A units, and they're shown in the movie during the garbage disposal scene. Bully having a more humanoid design and these big, angry, cartoony eyes that no other robot in this universe has is just too goddamn silly. If WALL-E ever got a cartoon series that aired on Disney Junior, I'd expect this kind of shit to be kept over there, not in the same comic run that begins with WALL-E watching all of his friends die one by one as he's left to work on an abandoned planet. The tones are in direct conflict here, it just doesn't work. It feels like a totally unnecessary addition for the sake of artificially giving this story some stakes. And sure, it leads to these issues being moderately more exciting than the first half, but it comes at the cost of making the series worse in general. I have a hard time believing that this is canon, but there's nothing arguing against that, so yeah, I guess. Canonically, 700 years before the events of the movie, WALL-E and his human friend Andy have to defeat a giant cartoon character by attaching him to a magnet and freeing all of the WALL-E units kept in cages. If you want to come to your own conclusions about whether or not this feels right at home with this movie, then please be my guest. The writing is just a bit shoddier overall. The first 4 issues largely worked because they adopted the show don't tell mentality and lonely atmosphere that made WALL-E's opening so stellar, whereas here they've completely changed the tone of the story and given WALL-E a human companion who regularly talks about the current situation. There's also this spectacular cliffhanger and ass pull from the end of issue 6 and the beginning of issue 7, god damn it, where Andy spots a BNL starliner in the sky for some reason at the end of issue 6, races to get there at the start of issue 7, and then it turns out it was just a fucking hologram. Like, what do you mean? How does that work from the angle you saw it at? What? This is the most egregious and poorly written part of the comics and kinda exemplifies why I vastly prefer the first 4 issues over this entire story arc. It's just too silly. Ultimately, issue 7 does have a nice ending, with WALL-E and Andy finally repairing the rocket, and Andy tearfully wishing WALL-E goodbye as he sets off into space in the hopes of reuniting with his family. And that's the end of the prequel comics, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. Disney's partnership with Boom ended in 2010 and reprints ceased in 2012. Though if you asked me, I do think that was for the better of the WALL-E comics specifically. There aren't a whole lot of stories you can tell with WALL-E in the past, and no, I don't doubt it's possible to write a good one even to this day. After seeing how a lot of things in the last 4 issues played out, I don't think I would have wanted to see them try and tactlessly add on a bunch of wacky stuff to the world of WALL-E just for the sake of more content. I found that the second half of the comics kinda subtracted from the overall story, rather than adding anything super meaningful. For the time being, anything, this seems to be the only WALL-E prequel content that we're ever going to get, and to be honest, I'm happy it didn't overstay its welcome. And at the very least, it's an interesting read, and adds more tragedy to WALL-E's loneliness than was already implied in the movie. Okay, now let's talk about cannibalism. Now, I apologize, this section will be going into theory territory, but I wanted to talk about this topic in general because it fascinates me, you know, beyond the cannibalism. Now, one of the most popular and morbid theories about WALL-E that you've likely seen talk about on Reddit or just from the 2 film theory videos that have millions of views seeks to answer the question of, just how is the Axiom providing food for all of the humans on board? They do mention they have some sort of regenerative food source, but not much beyond that, nor do we get an explanation as to how it works.
Regenerative food buffet.
We see no sign of there being any animals or plant life on the Axiom whatsoever. I mean, hell, I hope they don't have any plant life growing somewhere on that damn ship, because that would be pretty fucking embarrassing. It could be argued that BNL found a way to constantly generate artificial food without the need for that many resources, but it stands to reason that you can't just generate food from nothing. The Axiom will eventually run out of resources, especially because the original Axiom cruise was supposed to last 5 years until Operation Cleanup was deemed a failure, with it likely having enough food and resources for the full 5-year trip, maybe double that if we're being generous for like emergency cases and stuff like that. And given by this point the autopilot is in full control and stopping the Axiom from returning to Earth, they can't exactly go back to get any resources, of which there aren't many. So how is food provided to the humans on board, who all appear to be drinking food from cups most of the time? Well, the next logical answer is cannibalism. Shred those humans down and blend them into drinks. At least that's the short version of the theory. Again, there's 2 MatPat videos and dozens of threads online discussing it, and while there is some debate about the math being off or whatnot, I've still not seen a convincing argument that says this theory is dead wrong from a conceptual standpoint. I mean, if you pay attention to every single background character on the Axiom, you straight up cannot find a single one that looks close to being old. I know a lot of people who believe in this theory say that just because MatPat went and checked a few years ago, but for the sake of this video, I decided to do a thorough double check, and I can confirm there are no old people who are visibly aboard the Axiom. What a lovely use of 3 hours of my dwindling chud life. This could very well be because human life expectancy has somehow increased exponentially, if the lifespan of each captain is anything to go by, despite the fact that everyone on board the Axiom is morbidly obese. No shade, I just don't get how that works. Suggesting that when you do eventually reach old age or get sick or just die on the spot, you just get taken to the milkshake factory and blended into sustenance. It's simply a logical way to reason how humans have been able to get 700 years worth of food out of a cruise intended for just 5 years of use. It's an incredibly dark and morbid theory. It's kinda hard to see the movie the same way you used to if you subscribe to it, but it just seems too damn plausible, to me at least. Now, the obvious answer to this question is obviously that this is a movie intended for a general family audience with kids in mind. They were obviously not thinking about cannibalism while they were making this movie, but that kind of overthinking is what makes theories fun in the first place. So if anyone ever tells you to stop overanalyzing this kids movie with your morbid theories about how some of the stuff actually works, they are effectively shoving a big no fun allowed sign in your precious face. So screw them, go have fun. I figured this was a worthwhile bit of the lore to mention because it does provide a potential and plausible answer to a plot hole, while also giving me an excuse to actually talk about the Axiom in more detail. So, the Axiom. One thing I've always wondered about is how the first generation of humans aboard the Axiom felt about not returning to Earth after 5 years had passed. While it's easy to chalk this up to humans being so complacent with a new overindulgent lifestyle, it's worth noting that according to the Axiom commercials found online, there were around 600,000 passengers aboard the Axiom alone.
Designed to accommodate the needs and desires of each of her 600,000 passengers.
It doesn't take a genius to figure out there's a good chance 1 out of these 600,000 people is gonna pay attention when the ship doesn't go back to Earth after they've gone past the time frame. I'm only bringing this all up because, as evidenced later in the movie, Captain McCree had no idea Operation Cleanup had failed. The recording from Shelby Forthright announcing this in 2110 was classified and meant strictly for the autopilots on every BNL Starliner to view. No prior captains had access to this information, and this information was most definitely not disclosed to the passengers on board the ship. Unless you read issue 4 of the WALL-E prequel comic. Given that nothing has struck this comic off as non-canon yet, I feel it's at least worth mentioning that issue 4 begins with a shot of Andy's family aboard the Axiom. As Captain Reardon, this is also the first and only time in the entire canon we get to see a previous Axiom captain talk, acknowledges that it's been 5 years since the Axiom left the Earth, and specifically announces that Operation Cleanup is nearing completion, and that the passengers should get themselves ready to return home. The first generation of people aboard the Axiom would have absolutely had knowledge of Operation Cleanup, and seemed to be given frequent updates on its progress. So what happened? Obviously, the humans weren't told that returning to Earth was out of the question, so if any humans did have questions about it, what would happen? This is an area of the story you could consider to be a bit of a plot hole, but I see it as an interesting opportunity to actually tell some stories about the first generation of Axiom passengers if Pixar ever feels like revisiting WALL-E's story one day. Could make for some genuinely profound existential horror, you know, G-rated horror. I also think it's just fun to theorize about these parts of the lore that not many people pay attention to. In fact, I think if the WALL-E comics continued, they may have followed up on this, because the first Axiom captain telling the passengers that they're going to return to Earth soon, only for nothing to come of it, is a very interesting angle to take a side story. Could really emphasize the death of human will, as a majority of the ship's passengers let by and large handle and bring comfort to their lives, while a small group of people who are actually aware that they're never returning home have to cope with that. I'm doing a lot of theorizing in this video, so sorry if anything isn't super concrete, but I find all of these possibilities brought about by small details in the film itself and in supplementary material to be really fascinating. I'm all about this shit. One last detail I want to mention is that while human life expectancy seems to be pretty damn high across the board, there's some evidence shown with the ages of previous captains that suggests this overindulgent lifestyle, rampant consumerism, and focus on comfort and complacency is now finally leading to a decrease in life expectancy after 700 years and several generations. The two captains before Captain McCree served for 128 and 124 years respectively, around 10 to 20 years less than previous captains. While this is definitely a very slow and gradual decline in life expectancy over the course of 700 years, this does suggest that the Axiom will not be able to sustain human life forever, and humans will eventually die out because of a life of endless consumption and complacency. Very poetic considering the entire reason they're out in space in the first place. Now, what else should I talk about? It seems that most of everything I wanted to discuss has been covered. Oh, wait, I got it, okay. Well, this next part is definitely not canon. I wanted to cover that one deleted scene just for fun. This isn't really much of a lore thing, but I figured I'd include this in the video for fun because barely anyone has talked about this in a proper video before, and given how much of a big deal people make out of anything from Pixar that's even remotely dark, I find it weird that no one's taken the opportunity to bring this up. There's one deleted scene included in the bonus features of WALL-E that is basically just an earlier and more rougher draft of an already existing scene in the movie. The scene where Captain McCree finds out about Directive A113 and that Operation Cleanup was considered a failure 700 years ago. The version of this scene that made the final cut shows Shelby Forthright, CEO of By and Large, looking ragged, tired, and worn down, addressing the camera to inform the autopilots of each starliner that Operation Cleanup had failed due to rising toxicity levels, before putting on a gas mask as he presumably gets ready to finally leave the planet. It's simple, it's a bit deflating given the current situation in the movie, and it ultimately works. Though you could argue it maybe doesn't sell just how bad the situation on the planet really is, or just how uninhabitable it is for humans. The gas mask kinda tells you everything you need to know, but it is missing a bit of that drama, I guess. Now, the original version of this scene that got cut has that drama by tenfold, because holy crap, comparing these two scenes is night and day, to the point where I honestly think I prefer a Pixar film being less dark in the final cut, because they kinda go overboard.
And do not return to Earth! Repeat, do not return to Earth! I wanna live!
This is less of a calm public service announcement vibe and more of a nuclear level threat vibe. The music going crazy, the sirens blaring, Shelby basically being stuck in a dangerous scenario on the planet, that fucking close-up of Shelby's face that genuinely freaks me the fucking hell out. Like, my god. Look, maybe I'm just soft, but there is something about this drawing that actually genuinely freaks me out and I don't know what it is. I could stomach the monster fetus in Resident Evil Village, but this simple drawing is enough to give me goosebumps. Please, can someone who's proficient in psychology tell me why I'm getting spooked by this? I would love to know. And then the cherry on top is Shelby's final words. I never would have guessed this absolute nightmare fuel could have been turned into such a comparatively tame and outright chilled out scene. It's quite intense, definitely too intense honestly. There's a line between showing just how dangerous the Earth is for the average human given the toxicity levels, and in doing whatever the hell this is. As much as this scene gives me the creeps for some reason, I still kinda like it. As much as it doesn't fit the scenario it was made for, it's still a very well put together scene, even if it is just an animatic. And really, I think it should be brought up more when people discuss dark or disturbing cut content from Disney and Pixar films. I just never see it get brought up despite how crazy it is. I hope that giving it the spotlight here will give the next guy making a top 10 scariest Disney moments video a shot of inspiration. Sorry to distract from the main topic of the video, but I was getting real tired of being one of the only people still aware of this scene to this day, and in general I thought it'd be interesting to end the video on a neat bit of trivia. And that's a wrap. That was all of the hidden lore of WALL-E that I could find. I'm aware this video will probably end up being shorter than the Incredibles video, despite me technically having more stuff to talk about, but I don't know, man. Videos are kinda hard to make when you've got 3 holes punched straight into your gut. Nevertheless, I hope you all enjoyed this video and found it interesting at the very least. I'm kinda surprised not many people have touched on WALL-E's lore. It seemed like kind of an easy topic in retrospect, and I'll take any opportunity to talk in detail about one of my favorite Pixar movies. I'm looking to make more videos like this one and the Incredibles video, hopefully next time without having to half-ass the presentation. So if you have any suggestions for movies or TV shows with hidden lore outside the thing itself that not many people know about, feel free to leave your suggestions in the comments. I hope I can make something similar to these videos again sometime soon, because I do genuinely enjoy making these a lot more than the usual vids. Anyway, thank you for watching. Play Deadlock.
Fucking idiot.
Ooh. He does know.
I would have had him. I genuinely would have fucking had him.
Ivy's free here.
Actually, wait.
Oh, you got him!